Today, we have witnessed a major development since the end of the Cold War, and that is Russia has, if we can call it invasion, it has invaded a neighboring country called Ukraine, and there is a military incursion that reached till the capital, Kiev. A few days ago, we were only talking about the Donbass region, which means Donetsk and Lugansk. But today, Russia has reached into the capital. We have seen the airports. We have seen from the northern side of Kiev, there are military warplanes, there are helicopters from all sides attacking Ukraine. Why do you think Russia has resorted to this military escalation in Ukraine when only a few days ago Putin recognized Donetsk and Lugansk as independent states, and therefore he was intending only to protect the Donbass region, right?
First of all, the issue is a bit complicated regarding Ukraine. We need to go back to the history of the country and how it was formed in the beginning of the century when some Russian territories were added to Ukraine during the Bolshevik regime in the early days of the Soviet Revolution as part of the rhetoric that to bypass nationalities and build international brotherhood, etc. All this motto of the communist regime has, given some parts that used to be part of Russia to Ukraine, as Ukraine itself was part of the Soviet Union. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, Ukraine was targeted by the West as the other end of a bridgehead that would start in France, includes Germany, Poland, and Ukraine, in order to serve as a bridgehead for the United States to get into Eurasia. And this is mentioned in the book of Brzezinski, The Grand Chessboard, in which he doesn't innovate the idea, but rather he articulates on an idea and a concept that was established long before him by other geopolitical thinkers in the United States, including Nicholas Spickman and, of course, Walter Lippmann and other theoreticians who were adopted by Kissinger and Brzezinski, and of course other geopolitical thinkers of the modern time in the US. When the Soviet Union collapsed, part of an oral agreement between Mikhail Gorbachev, the last supreme leader of the Soviet Union, and George Bush Sr. was that NATO should not expand eastward because the national security concept of Russia is built on strategic depth and in-depth defense, in which Russia considers that its pivot is Moscow and its region, and Russia should distance any threat against Moscow by building alliances with satellite countries around it. And George Bush Sr. accepted this agreement orally. However, we saw the expansion of NATO eastward to include Poland, Hungary, after the division of Yugoslavia, Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro, Macedonia, Bulgaria, Romania, Moldavia, and the Baltic states. So this came at the expense of the national security concept of the Soviet Union and of Russia, of course. That's why the Russians or the Russian leadership was so sensitive regarding the issue of Ukraine joining NATO, because in this, NATO will be positioned only 800 kilometers away from Moscow. And in the age of ballistic missiles and nuclear warheads, this would put the heart of Russia under direct threat. In addition, it would give Ukraine is not that distant from Kazakhstan. So it will give the United States and its NATO allies the possibility of jumping from Ukraine into Central Asia and hitting Russia in its soft belly, which is Central Asia.
But
So
Dr. Jamal,
yeah,
don't
I wanted to clarify this background to say that the Russian move was in reaction to this threat. And there was another thing, that the Russian-speaking regions, they don't include only the Donetsk and Lugansk region, but they expand to Kharkov, to Poltava, to Odessa, and other southern regions, which were submitted to persecution in the past 8 years at the hands of the right-wing government that took over power in Ukraine as part of struggle over influence in this country. So that's why the invasion came to secure this region. Actually, there was no invasion, direct invasion by Russian troops so far. It was air raids by the Russian military and support to the Donbass, to the Lugansk and Donetsk separatists, quote unquote, to reclaim the regions that were taken from them in 2014.
Dr. Jamal Wakim, there are two things here. One, for me, do you think that this invasion was premature? Because first of all, Ukraine didn't join NATO yet. And Putin said, if Ukraine joins NATO, we will attack. He said it just a week ago, right? But Ukraine didn't join NATO yet. And today the invasion came. And it seems that it gives the impression or the image that Russia is an invader, right? And they're now comparing Putin to Hitler on social media. Of course, I'm not taking what the social media pundits are saying, but there is a general mood now, especially among the younger generations in countries like Poland, like the Poland, Czech Republic, and other former Soviet Union countries, right? And these people are more or less more attracted to the American and the European models, and now they see themselves threatened by Russia, right? This is number one. Number two, the attack in Ukraine didn't only stop in the regions that are that ethnic Russians live. I mean, Kiev was under attack today, and there are now nuclear sites.
Please. There was an attack on military bases and airports. I'm not defending or taking sides. I'm trying to see this from an objective perspective. So there were air raids against military airports and against military headquarters to, of course, to flatten and soften the Ukrainian defenses. But there were no incursions so far. I don't know, as far as I saw on Western and non-Western media, there were no military incursions, land troops.
No, mostly air.
It was mostly air raids. Yes. As for the land expansion, it was undertaken by the Donbass people to reclaim what they consider as their territories and their lands. And the Russian-speaking regions stretch all the way to the eastern shores of the Dnieper River, in addition to Odessa. And we know from history that the Russian Empire had fought several wars to take over these lands from the Ottoman Empire. So it was the Russian rather than the Ukrainian Empire that took over these regions. I'm not for military conquest, but I'm talking history now. And it was the Russians who shed their blood in order to take over these regions. If we want to talk about historical legitimacy or a historical claim, maybe the Ottomans would have more claim to this region than the Ukrainians. And maybe the Greeks before them have claim, and maybe other people before them have claim to this region. So we cannot underestimate the issue of ethnicities living, especially that the Russian leadership after the collapse of the Soviet Union was highly driven by nationalist aspirations. So, and of course, if we see the course of events, we cannot start now. As the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia stated it, what happened today was a conclusion of a war that was started 8 years ago, rather than starting a new war.
Yeah.
And we need to link this to the expansion of NATO. So it was US and Western aggressive moves that drove finally the Russians into this reaction. Back in 1960, 61, 62, when the Cuban leadership asked to set Soviet missiles on its territory, and it was 90 miles away from Florida, the United States threatened to wage a nuclear war against the Soviet Union itself. If when, for example, a few years ago, Russia participated in an air show in Venezuela with 2 jets, military jets, it was an outburst in the United States. What if, for example, Russia expands its military presence and set military bases in Mexico? What would be, or in Canada, what would be the reaction of the United States targeting, and these missiles, we know that they would be targeting US territories. So we need to be balanced in our approach and try to see things from a different perspective. Of course, Western media is trying to promote a certain narrative, but at the same time, they are obstructing other channels from setting or presenting their narrative. And this is what they are doing to Deutsche Welle or to Russia Today. Deutsch,
channel, yeah, German channel, yes.
The German channel. And today we saw similar, let's say, measures, or threatening to take similar measures against Russia Today France, or in other languages, or in the UK, for example.
Yes,
So,
they're talking about banning Russia Today even in the UK, and they call it like a disinformation or propaganda outlet for the Kremlin.
It's my right to defend myself, but it's not my right to take a gun and point it at others and say it's in self-defense. We know how pivotal Ukraine is for the Russian defense, and in Brzezinski's book, he says that Russia without Ukraine will be stripped of its Eurasian character and become an Asian power. And that's what they are trying to do, the United States, to draw a wedge between Russia and Europe in order not only to, let's say, isolate Russia, but also to have a better grab of Europe and keep it under US control. This is what the US geopolitical thinkers say, to keep Europe under control and at bay in order for Europe not to play an independent role. And we see that the first side effect of the war today was increase in the prices of gas, consumed gas in Europe, also a drop in the value of the euro. And all American actions undertaken in the past 3 decades, they were not only harmful to the security of Russia, but they were also harmful to the interests of Europe, and mainly to the interests of Germany, that the United States is trying to strip it from the possibility of playing an independent role at the international scene.
Dr. Jamal, an important question I want to ask is about when Putin said we are going to denazify, he used the term, we are going to denazify Ukraine. Do you think this is an exaggeration, or what does he mean with the denazification of Ukraine?
We actually saw pro-Nazi, neo-Nazis parading in over and over again in Kiev, in other cities, Ukrainian cities, mainly in the north and the west. And we know back in history, during the Second World War, the forefathers of these neo-Nazis were fighting alongside the Nazi German army back then. And we saw how some neo-Nazi gangs targeted ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine. Thousands of people got killed. So we cannot underestimate what's going on. And we cannot underestimate the threat of the neo-Nazis rising again, not only in Ukraine, but in various parts of Europe now.
Actually, the number of the civilians or the people who died in the Donbass region by whether the Ukrainian army or these neo-Nazi groups amount to 13,000 people. And this is the same number of people died in Aleppo, for example, by the Islamists during the 4 years of occupation. Last question, Dr. Jamal. Do you think Putin is going to be satisfied by disarming and eliminating the threat of NATO from Ukraine alone, or he's going further into other Eastern European countries, whether through diplomacy or military means?
Well, we cannot speculate a lot about the future, but it was noteworthy what Putin said when he asked the United States to withdraw its troops, not only from around Ukraine, but also from all countries in Eastern and Central Europe that were, of course, spread after the collapse of the Soviet Union as part of returning to the original deal between Gorbachev and George Bush Sr. But so far, I believe that Russia has been able to secure its borders, to ensure its national security by waging this blow against Ukraine. And I don't believe that Russia is thirsty to go to war, because this war will be devastating to all powers participating.
In short, Dr. Jamal, do you think we are witnessing a rebirth of bipolarity or multipolar system?
Well, I believe that we are witnessing the rise of a multipolar system, because Russia, despite its power now, we cannot compare it to the former Soviet Union. And there are other powers that are trying to get a piece of the pie at the international scene, including China, India, Iran as a super regional power, Pakistan, South Africa, Brazil, and Argentina. Of course, Europe should have been able to play an independent role, but it has forsaken its independent role for the sake of being under American tutelage.
Dr. Jamal Wakim, thank you very much for your time. It's great always and a pleasure to have you on Syriana Analysis. And guys, thank you very much for watching. And please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It really helps me with the algorithm of YouTube. And if you want to support such an independent commentary work on YouTube, please become a patron. Link in the description below, and see you next time.